Hi everyone, Charlotta here. I recently made a new dress to wear all year round and I filmed the process to share with you. In this video I'm going to actually show you the dress, how it turned out, and I'm also going to review what went well and what I would have liked to have done different. So I've changed back into my old bow dress so I can actually look at the new bow dress with you rather than pointing at it, at myself. So I'm going to actually do in this video is review of the finishing touches, go through one thing I did completely wrong, and then finally also do a review of comparison of the 3 bow dresses I've made over the last 15 years and work out with you how, if you're not trying to copy but reinterpret pattern, how little change can completely change the flat pattern and the dress. So first of all, let's have a look at the finished dress. What works really well about this dress is the round but quite squared, slightly lower neckline, which I find quite flattering because it's higher than my original neckline, so it's more variable. And at the back I've just made it slightly dipped, so again it looks nice as a necklace, but you can still wear your base layer on top. I've done the whole style fitted by the pleats rather than darts. As you can see, it's sort of a slightly more casual style, which I think works really good for day-to-day dresses. As this is a day dress, I have done the faster way of just, for example, I've top stitched the seam on the waist rather than bagging it all out. I've got a top stitched cuff rather than an invisible stitched cuff, so that you could have, for a more couture look, you can just do it folded and then just stitch them the inside so you don't see any top stitching, which is a bit more delicate. But I sort of, because it's worn to be every day, I didn't mind any sort of seams, and I've also done a top stitching on the neckline. So again, it's more casual rather than couture, but I quite like the effect. So overall, I think the dress turned out well. I know the fabric and the style isn't to everybody's taste, but I think even if you don't like the graphic design or the bright colors, or if you find the style a bit too fitted or vintage, you can still use different techniques to make it more your own style. So if you look at the 2 of them, it's the same technique, but by different fabric choices, by not putting sleeve and changing the neckline, slightly different volume, you get a different style. So this is a bit more muted, maybe a bit more utilitarian, my dress, and the new dress is a bit more out there. So it might sort of be a bit more Marmite or divide your opinion. But I think even just as a drafting technique, you could make it in jersey or plain wool or even a cotton denim, and the technique still adds a bit of detail to a simple daytime dress. So these are all the good bits about the dress and the things I like, but I thought I also talk about what things which went wrong. And I didn't want this dress to be a copy of this dress, but I wanted it to be a reinterpretation. So I knew the technique and I wanted to share with you. And so I just roughly thought, this is how much volume I added, and I measured them. And this is how long the skirt is, and this is the neckline and what doesn't work. So I actually reviewed this dress and took the measurements I liked, but ignored the ones I didn't like. So that all went well. It's nearly similar. I'm going to show you the 2 patterns in a minute to show you a difference. But one thing which I still don't know what went wrong. For some reason, the skirt was about 10 centimeters or 4 inches shorter than I wanted. And I think that's what I probably didn't do. I didn't double check my measurements. And that's one of the things that still happens even if you're working professionally, if you're making clothes for years and years. Sometimes you rush things and you don't double check, or you got something in your mind which is wrong, or you've written down something wrong, and you get a measurement wrong. And because also, especially because it's a length I've always used, so I was probably not careful enough and I just rushed it, and the skirt ended up far too short above the knee, which for that style I like it to be on the narrow part of the knee. But what I did actually, and it worked out quite well, I'm going to show you now, I had to improvise and add a facing, but I actually think it adds a nice finish now. So in the end, my mistake, I've learned from it. I'm going to double check everything from now on. I've done worse ones over the years, but this wasn't great, and I quite like a final finish. So all is well in the end. So what I did for the dress in the end is I added a really thick facing, and that's probably for a circle skirt. It's the most time intensive method of finishing, because you have to cut a curved facing and then stitch on the other side of it, and then trench stitch it, which means, or ditch stitching, which means you literally first of all stitch it on and then you stitch in your ditch again. So in theory, you don't, as you can see, you don't really see it on the outside. I'm going to show you. Oh, here, look, here I've gone slightly off the trench, so you can see it. But in theory, it just disappears completely. And on the inside, you've got a really neat finish, which is turned over and stitched. So my mistake in the end actually gives it a nice finish. And also it gives the skirt a bit of weight, because there's nothing worse than sort of I don't really, unless it's on purpose, a sort of flimsy circle skirt which just doesn't hang beautifully. So adding a facing or weights actually gives it a much more sculptural feel rather than sort of blowing around. So my mistake in the end, actually, it cost me a bit more work and time, but it turned out well. So that was my quick review and analysis about the boat dress, what worked and what I learned as well. To finish off this video, I thought it'd be really nice to look at how the pattern has changed over the years, because I've now made this dress 3 times, and over the sort of nearly 15 years, my body has changed, my style has changed. So this is not really about about copying things, in which case I would have done it quite badly. It's about how you reinterpret styles over the years as your figure changes, and maybe also your taste changes, and you learn more. So I'm going to have a look at the 3 patterns and compare them. So if you look at the 3 patterns next to each other, you can really see the evolution. So this pattern is nearly 15 years old. The whole style was inspired by one of my lecturers at Central St. Martin's, who had a Japanese t-shirt with a similar sort of twisted bow, and I then interpreted for my first one as a one-piece garment. So you can see that's my top and that's my skirt with the pleat, and then you literally just have a little keyhole you stitch on the waist. This is your tie. Then I actually put in a seam here, but that could have easily been one piece, and then you get your center front fold. So in theory it could be one really long piece. So the whole front was one piece and the whole back was one piece, but the general design stayed the same. So this is the one I made about 2 or 3 years later, after I just done my pattern cutting degree, and I was obsessed with trying to get things which are nearly square and which stay as straight as grain as possible. So that's why this is nearly a square. It's got a very relatively high waist, and it's got a very deep armhole, and then it's just all nearly parallel. If I split it again, I would try to get it completely squared. And that dress worked nearly perfect, but it was a bit strange around the neck and the armhole. So the next version, I wanted to sort of improve it, but I also wanted to share the technique with you. So rather than adapting this and cutting in or tracing it and then maybe sort of not knowing where the lines are, because this is already a copy of the working pattern, I decided to make a new working pattern which has a better armhole, a neckline, but you can see the basic principle is the same on all three. So you've got your center front, your neckline, and then the volume becomes nearly at 90 degrees in the center fold. And I think what you could try in future is actually that you make it at 90 degrees, so the whole thing ends up being a square, which I think would be really flattering. And that's my review of a bow dress and also how the pattern has developed over the last 15 years. I do hope you found it a little bit helpful of how skills and taste can influence a pattern, and also how to finish a dress you have designed yourself. To finish off, I thought it might be nice to share a few short clips of how I would love to wear the dress every day. Sadly, it's a bit of a fantasy. Enjoy!